Just for a record. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Gail Sills is going to come up and introduce the evening. I just want to let you know that we've got a Zoom screen up there just for recording purposes. This is not a hybrid event, but it's just the easiest way to record things in here. So when you do have questions, and you will, please speak into the microphone. Otherwise, nobody can really hear you in the room, but then I can't get it recorded. And so all your thoughts that other people would love to hear as well won't be recorded or heard. So, again, I'm Liz Hildebrand, ED of NAMI Queens Nassau, and Gail Sills, board member, will introduce our evening. Gail, you must, Gail. This one work. I turned it off.
Okay, all right. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all here. I'm Gail Sills. I'm one of the board members of NAMI QN. There are other board members here. Lee Israel is here. David Sills is here. And we have a volunteer, Mark, who comes and does all kinds of dragging the stuff and talking to people about his journey with mental illness. We're all here for a purpose. We all share a common journey. Some of the journey is hard, some of it is not so hard, but we're all here to learn and to help each other on our journeys with our loved ones. So that being said, we have an expert here who can give us some information, perhaps guide us along the way. And I'm going to ask Liz to introduce our famous, fabulous person, Jamie Rosen.
Thank you, Gail. So we are really very blessed to have met Jamie a couple of years ago because her depth of knowledge about the world and needs of both a caregiver and someone who has a mental health condition are superior, as well as how the system works, that big mystery box, how this hospital works. Our friends from Zucker are here. And so that is essential. When our loved one is in crisis, we're in crisis too. And it's hard to think about all the pragmatic things that Jamie Rosen knows. So without further ado, Jamie, tell a little bit about your credentials and who you are, and start your presentation. Thank you.
Hello. All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jamie Rosen. I am a mental health lawyer. So my background, my training is undergrad in psychology and criminal justice. And then I went to law school. And my intention of going to law school was always to work with families. And I didn't really know that mental health law was even an area of practice when I started. And it really is a much needed area of advocacy because the system, even being familiar with it for over a decade, is still so complicated and so challenging. And there's so many obstacles, so many hoops for you to jump through when you're advocating for your loved one who's in crisis and chronically ill. And it's very overwhelming. And it really does help to have someone in your corner helping you advocate. And I really like being that person for my clients and being able to educate them on their rights, their loved ones' rights, how the system works, how it doesn't work, and how to achieve a better outcome, how to achieve stability in your life and stability in your loved one's life. So tonight, we really wanted to talk to you about very specifically what I'm seeing in my practice is a lot more crises happening in the home where an adult child is living at home with mom and dad. That's like a very typical scenario. And something is going wrong. Maybe they are disconnecting from care and starting to decompensate. stopped their medication, the medication's not working, something's going on where the home is becoming an unsafe or untenable environment, really for everyone. And sadly, I am seeing this more and more in my practice where we have real safety issues at home and the family is distraught and so torn and feel so guilty because they're worried about their own safety, they're worried about their own well-being and their day-to-day life and being able to function as, going to work, taking care of other family members, taking care of themselves. But also their loved one is clearly suffering. Their loved one is creating an unsafe environment for themselves and for the rest of the family, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what their options are, and they don't know the consequences of what those options are. And it's very overwhelming, can be paralyzing, and then you can just do nothing. And the status quo continues. And I've had clients who come to me and their status quo has continued for months or a year plus before they finally get to the point where they say enough is enough. And they want to disrupt that status quo and they want to see some real change in their life and their loved one's life. So my goal tonight is really give you some information, give you some clarity on the options out there when there's a crisis at home, what your options are. We're going to talk a little bit about the clinical world and the legal world, how they're so intertwined when it comes to psychiatry. We're going to talk about some really hard decisions that families sometimes have to make when there's safety issues at home. When I'm working with clients in these situations, my goal is always compassion and understanding, but it really is also about safety. And when I have clients who come to me that feel really unsafe in their home, I was just telling someone that I had a client come to me that they have a lock on their bedroom door and that they eat meals in their bedroom and that they have a camera outside their door. And all night long, maybe their loved one is carrying on outside their bedroom and they can't sleep. And it's disrupting their ability to function because they're up all night just listening to their loved one who is clearly suffering. So what do you do if that's the life that you're living, or if that's the life that someone is living? So we're going to talk a little bit about mobile crisis services, a 911 call, the difference, when to use each resource or when not to use each resource, what a wellness check also means. All of these interventions, you're inviting someone into your home who you don't know. You don't necessarily know their training. You don't know their experience, and you don't know if they're compassionate, and there's always a risk. But under the circumstances we're talking about tonight, when we're talking about safety, sometimes you have to take that risk. So we'll talk about those 3 different interventions. We'll also talk about what is your goal when you're calling those people to your house, when you're inviting those people into your home because your loved one is suffering. Usually when you're at that point, you've exhausted any options for voluntary compliance or treatment or intervention, or they're at a point where they have no insight or such limited insight that they're not willing to seek help on their own. And now you're forced to confront involuntary options for interventions. We'll talk a little bit about orders of protection and how these interventions might lead to the need for an order of protection, where you can get an order of protection, and then also the unfortunate situation where these situations might lead to an arrest. And now you find that your loved one who is suffering from a serious mental illness is now in the criminal justice system. And what do you do when you find yourself there? Okay, so first we'll talk about bringing outside help into your home, where you yourself cannot convince your loved one to get the help they need. And now you're in a crisis situation where there's safety issues. There's different levels of intervention where people will come to your home upon your request for different purposes. Mobile crisis, many of you may have heard of or have read about over the past few years, this new 988 hotline. It's for this type of intervention. You can call that hotline and request a mobile crisis response. This is to help someone experiencing, what we call a behavioral health crisis. Something's going on with them in terms of their mental health symptoms, and you're worried about them and they won't do anything voluntarily to get help. The goal of the mobile crisis team is to de-escalate the situation that's happening in the home. They're going to come, it's generally someone who is clinically trained. What does that mean? They're supposed to have some type of mental health training, whether they are a social worker or have some other type of clinical training in this area to de-escalate a situation, stabilize the person in the home. The goal is not to have to remove them from the home involuntarily to a hospital. They really want to keep someone at home, offer them services, and do the follow-up to make sure they actually follow through and see the services that are recommended. It's not an emergency response. They say it's supposed to be a response within 2 hours. I have not had clients experience such a quick response. So it's not a substitute for a 911 call, which is police at your door. And it's not police at your door within 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. It's going to be that clinician or someone on their staff. So when you think about mobile crisis, you're not thinking about a situation where there's an immediate threat, there's immediate danger, there's a weapon, there's a threat of suicide, there's an actual suicide attempt. It's not a substitute for real 911. I need police in my home. Someone needs medical attention. This type of scenario is someone coming to speak with your loved one and try to convince them, have that conversation that maybe you can't have with them or you've tried having with them and wasn't successful. If the mobile crisis team gets to your home, does their assessment, has this conversation or tries to have this conversation and does feel that this person has reached a point where they do need to be removed from the home and that a higher level of intervention is necessary to get them out of the home and to an emergency room for an evaluation, they can then call for the backup for emergency services, police presence. Now you have a lot of people in your home, and the goal would be to get them to a hospital. They can make that assessment. When you think about calling 911, like I said, that's more for you have a real life-threatening emergency. There's already violence in the home. There's a real threat to someone's safety because of violence. And you need some police presence in the home. This is terrifying for families, and it's traumatic for families. And I've had families where I've had the conversation with them before it happens and when it happens, after it happens. And sometimes it makes people not want to call for help again because it's really unpredictable. Like I said, you don't know who's showing up at your house. You could get the nicest officer on the team. You could get the one who has all the training, who has personal experience in their life with a loved one with some type of disability, and this is their life's mission. And they really want to help you and help your loved one. And they can de-escalate the situation and get your loved one to a hospital safely. I have another client where they ended up tasing her son. And I don't say this to scare you. I say this because this is the reality. And this is the real hard choice that parents, siblings, family members have to make when you're inviting someone into your home asking for help. The hope with a police response is that they'll transport your loved one to an emergency room. They have the ability, if they believe the person meets the standard, that they're a danger to themselves or others, they have the ability to transport them to a hospital. They can call for EMS backup. If no imminent danger is found, and what often, I shouldn't say often, but what I have experienced with clients is police show up and the person is calm and the person is coherent and is on their best behavior and I did nothing wrong and the police leave. And despite what the family tells the police ahead of time on the phone or when they show up about what's been going on in that house and the behavior that's being exhibited, the police don't witness it for themselves and they say there's nothing we can do. Now you're stuck with the reality of now you're in your house with your loved one. You've just called the police on them and the police have left. So now they may feel empowered. See, nothing's wrong with me. The police even said I'm fine. So you have to evaluate all of these options. The kind of fourth scenario of what could happen when you're inviting police presence into your home is they could arrest your loved one. You're calling them to your house saying that there's some type of violence, danger. Maybe they put their hands on someone. Maybe they damaged property. Whatever they did, if it constitutes some type of criminal activity, let's say there's drugs in the house, they have drugs, they appear they're on drugs, anything like that. The police, they could get, your loved one could be arrested. So I explain these different scenarios of what can happen when you invite people into your home because you have to know, and I want everybody to have the information of what can happen. Even if you prepare for all four scenarios, there's always a fifth. So you can only do so much. I always say to people, you're doing the best you can with the information you have and the hand you've been dealt. The last intervention, which is kind of the least restrictive intervention, is a wellness check. And I bring this up because people ask me all the time about adult protective services and what happens if you call APS, if you call for a wellness check. Maybe the person doesn't live in your home, they live separately from you, and you've lost connection with them. All of a sudden, they stop returning your calls, they won't answer the door, or maybe you're not even in town and you can't just go knock on their door. But something happens and you're worried about them and you can't get eyes on them, or a family member can't get eyes on them. Now you're worried and you want someone to go knock on the door and check on them. Called a wellness check because you're checking on their well-being. You're asking basically the police to knock on the door and see what's going on inside the home, see what they're up to, if they're okay. The police will generally, ask them a few questions if they answer the door. I've had experience where if the person doesn't answer the door, they're probably not going to come back. If you file a report with APS, similarly, they'll go within, usually supposed to be 24 hours, knock on the door for their first visit, the caseworker that's assigned to your report. If they don't answer the door, maybe they'll come back another time. They don't answer the door. I've had cases that they just close the case. They're not taking extra steps to try to get through that front door. The wellness check can also escalate. So just like the mobile crisis, they can do their initial assessment and decide to escalate. A wellness check can also escalate because if they get in there and they see some type of imminent harm or imminent danger, they can then avail themselves of other services, EMS, mobile crisis. So they're all interconnected at some point. With all of these calls, what I like to have families prepare before the crisis is write it all down. Because when you're in the midst of the crisis, your brain is not working. It's almost like an injury to your own brain. It's trauma. You're in the midst of a crisis. You're not thinking straight. You don't remember what you said on the phone if you told them the whole story. What is the person's diagnosis? What are the symptoms? Even something like, we've had to call police to our house before. This is what's happened. This is what worked. This is what didn't work when we had police presence in our home. This is what kept everyone safe and got our loved one to a hospital safely. This is how we had a bad experience. As much information as you can provide that they'll listen to at that point with your initial intake with whoever you're calling for help. When they get on the scene, having something in writing for them, just so that it's all in one place and you don't have to worry about, what did I say? What did I forget? Do they have all the information? Is what I gave them accurate? You already have it written down. It's like your emergency cheat sheet. I like to have one for when you're calling for intervention in your home. And I like to have one to bring to the hospital with you if you get to that point, to give to the emergency room, whoever's evaluating your loved one in the emergency room. If they're admitted, to give to their doctor on the unit. You have to assume that all the information you give to one person is never making its way to the next. Your advocacy starts and it really never stops. and you will repeat the story and the information over and over and over to whoever will listen. And it's exhausting, but it's necessary because I've seen where people will fall through the cracks. And you can't assume that because you gave all the information to the emergency room admitting physician, and even if they put it in the medical record, even if they entered in all the information, you can't assume then that the admitting physician read everything. So I like to say, dot all your I's, cross all your T's. It's exhausting. Make sure everybody hears what you have to say. If people start talking to you, we're not going to talk really about the HIPAA laws tonight and what hospitals or doctors might say to you where I can't share information with you. Your loved one didn't provide consent. I can't share their protected health information with you. They can listen. That cheat sheet you have, they can take it. They can read it. You can give them more information than what's on that cheat sheet. And that information is really valuable. And that's because your loved one who's in the midst of a psychiatric crisis is not a reliable reporter. They're not sitting there and giving their history and admitting to their prior hospitalizations and that they haven't been taking their meds. And even things like I experienced side effects from my medication. That's why I stopped it, which is very reasonable. Some people really do have horrible side effects from their medication, but they're not in a state to be able to have that conversation with their doctor, reliably reporting their history, how they're feeling, what's going on with them. More often than not, I hear from clients that their loved one who was psychotic at home an hour ago, carrying on, talking to themselves, not taking care of themselves in the home, now in the emergency room is like the model patient and is cool, calm, and collected and able to have a rational conversation and can hold it together long enough that you can pull one over on the physicians or on the social workers. We don't know how much time they have to really do a full evaluation and make a determination. Does this person meet all the criteria for an admission to the hospital? Part of communicating, let's say we go through all this at home. We get our loved one to the hospital in the emergency room. Now what? We have our cheat sheet, yes. How do you get that information to the hospital? I say if it's possible, you're there in person. It is a lot harder to ignore someone when you're there in person, at the desk, at the emergency room, at admissions, asking to speak to someone, saying, I have important information about my family member. They were in my home. I have the information about why they were brought to the hospital and their history, their diagnosis, and their medications. It's a lot harder to ignore you than it is, when you're in person, than it is to ignore your phone call or your email. A lot of times I have clients who can't be there in person. We do the best we can. If you call and you can't get anyone, you call again. And so I like having multiple ways of contacting all of these people. You're there in person, it's there in writing, you're following up with a phone call. If they're getting through the emergency room and to admission, they're now admitted onto a unit, you're continuing to do the same thing. You want to get the information for their social worker. That's usually who the liaison is with the family. And you want to make sure they have all the information. And you want to stay in touch with that person because before you know it, they're going to start talking about the discharge plan. Before you know it, these hospitals are not keeping people very long. They're going to start talking about how do we get this person back home? These hospitals want to stabilize people and get them back home. They're not meant for long-term care. And so that can be really scary because whatever just happened in your home, you're worried about it happening again. You're worried that they're not stable enough, that your loved one might be returning to your home in the same exact state of mind, and that the safety threats might still be there. Before I go on to talk about kind of the end of a hospitalization and the discharge planning options and that road, does anybody have any questions about the interventions at home? Yes, please. Wait, we have a second.
Yes?
I noticed you didn't mention the 988 number. Did you mention you said 911, did you not?
So the
Did you say 988?
I did.
Okay, because I know that would not involve a police response necessarily. Is that right? I just wanted to make clear. Obviously, if I didn't get it, then I hope maybe I needed to be clarified just to make sure.
Sure. So the 988 hotline,
Mhm.
you can request the mobile crisis response through the 988 hotline.
Oh,
They serve multiple functions. So someone can call themselves if they're having, thoughts of wanting to harm themselves, suicidal thoughts, and they want some type of peer support. They offer a variety of different services through the 988 hotline. It can be a text, a phone call. I think they have like a live chat service as well. But you can also request mobile crisis services through the 988 hotline.
anybody else?
Hi. My question is about family court orders of protection.
That's next.
Okay. And failure to thrive, you're going to talk about?
Well, you want to ask a question about that? Like, what do you
Well,
want to know?
The mental hygiene law that was changed in August of 2025 includes or eliminated that there has to be a dangerous act. But the way it was taught to me is that lots of physicians, social workers, police do not know that when someone is neglecting their self so severely, it's called failure to thrive. We can push for that to be kept. Because I think, as you're saying, many people can get to the emergency room, they don't always get to be admitted. So people have to have that law in their pocket. And is that something that you're teaching to your clients?
Yes. So you're right. Last year, New York expanded our standard for involuntary commitment. It used to just be, imminent threat of harm to yourself or to others. And what that is interpreted to mean is that there's a real risk of violence or actual act of violence towards self or others. And the law has been expanded to address a situation which, as we all know, the majority of people suffering from a mental illness are not violent, and they wouldn't necessarily meet that criteria. And we shouldn't have to wait for something horrible to happen before they can get treatment. But that's essentially the situation that many people found themselves in. As of last year, the law was expanded. So essentially, for those who are experiencing a failure to thrive, they're neglecting their activities of daily living, as we call it. They're not taking care of themselves, their hygiene. And so in that scenario, it's supposed to now be considered that they've met criteria for an involuntary admission under those circumstances.
Thank you. So I have a question related to that, and then I have another question related to what you last ended with. Do a lot of the professionals understand that the law expanded regarding the failure to thrive, or is that something that we would always have to remind them of?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what type of training everyone has received as laws are updated and what's required. Like for me, I have, for my license as a lawyer, I have continuing education requirements. Most people with professional licenses have continuing education requirements. For doctors, social workers, the staff in the hospital, you would hope that something so major like that impacts their admissions process and their admissions paperwork. It's literally in their paperwork when you see your loved one. If you've been through a hospitalization with your loved one, if you've ever read through their paperwork and read their 2PC, their 2 physician certificate that has signatures by 2 physicians who have certified that your loved one meets criteria to be admitted to a hospital, or their emergency paperwork under the emergency standards, you see that it's written out there. This is the law, New York's law, and they meet criteria and they check the boxes. You would hope, but I don't know. So I assume that they don't, and that when I'm coming into the emergency room with a loved one, and part of my advocacy, and they're asking me, well, did this person threaten to hurt anyone? Did this person, actually hurt anyone? What was the situation at home? And you start describing it, you have to advocate for your loved one and make sure that that's part of your advocacy.
My other question is just regarding if a loved one is ending up in the hospital, they're transported because somehow you convinced whoever that they are failing to thrive. What about like shortage of beds and the mental health system and finding a space and that challenge? Like how does one deal with that? And some hospitals like North Shore, they don't have a mental health unit any longer. And there's a shortage. There's a shortage. And then there's also the question of quality of care. Like if they are able to find a bed, is it going to be somewhere where they can get meaningful care that actually makes an impact? Or is it just somewhere that they're just going to sedate the patient because that's just easier and keep them comfortable? And that's not really treatment. It's just keeping them calm and comfortable. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, that's the reality of our system. If you're calling for one of these interventions where you're bringing people into your home and asking them to take your loved one to a hospital, I've literally had clients been told by police, like, we're not a taxi service. You don't get to pick where you're going. If you're picked up in Nassau County, you're going to NUMC. If you're picked up in Suffolk County, you're going out to Stony Brook. Like those are the big hubs where, Stony Brook, for example, has a big comprehensive psychiatric emergency program. And from there, you're right, there is a shortage of beds. When you're evaluated at NUMC or Stony Brook, if they don't have a bed there, more often, if you're evaluated at NUMC, you'll be admitted at NUMC. But if you're evaluated at Stony Brook, you could end up at any of the hospitals in Suffolk County that has a bed, and you don't necessarily get a preference. I've had some luck if I can convince them and say to them at the emergency room, listen, this person has been hospitalized multiple times at, a Northwell hospital, any of them in Suffolk County. They had really good care there, really good experience there. Maybe their outpatient provider was also affiliated with Northwell. Maybe if there's a bed available, you have a good shot of getting your loved one to that hospital. But otherwise, it's wherever a bed is available. And you're right. Some of those hospitals, great reputations, great experience. And it could be different from one unit to the other. It's not necessarily dependent on the name of the hospital. I've had clients have really horrific experiences at some hospitals. And then the next month, I have a client who says it was the best care they ever received. It really depends on your social worker, what they're going to advocate for your loved one coming out of the hospital. Really depends on the doctor, and even something like the residents that are working on the unit underneath the attending physician who are seeing your loved one more often. So your laundry list of, concerns is valid. You lose a lot of control when your loved one is involuntarily hospitalized because you don't get to pick and choose the hospital. You don't get to pick and choose the doctor, the social worker. And I have people say to me, I'm really unhappy with the care they're receiving. Can't we just transfer them to another hospital? You can't. Really can't. They're not going to transfer someone from the same level of care at one hospital to another, like what we call acute care to acute care. Not only is it an insurance issue, but they don't do that. Yeah, absolutely.
I have two questions, Jamie. Adult Protective Services, is this a legal document or is this a phone call to make, or what does that mean?
Sure. So Adult Protective Services, that's an agency run county by county. You can make a referral on the phone, you can make a referral online, and you're basically asking for someone to go check on your loved one. Their whole role, Adult Protective Services, is to try to keep people in the community, give them the services and support that they need in the community. If they take it all the way and they can get your loved one support I've seen it work real wonders, and they have access to resources and services and supports that can really make a difference. But for the most part, it's voluntary. That person has to want to accept the help. Usually when you're in a crisis at home, that person is not accepting help from anyone.
I just wanted, I've often heard that it takes 3 police visits, 3 documented police visits for the police to, I'm going to say acquiesce and bring your loved one to a hospital, that documentation, not necessarily to arrest them, but to take action. Is that true?
I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I've had experience where, police presence is necessary once and the person's taken to a hospital. So I don't have experience that there's like a magic number.
Good to know.
The new Crisis Stabilization Center at Central Nassau Guidance, I was told, or we thought, it would give the police another place to bring people other than Nassau University Medical Center or the jail. And do you know, have you had any experience with whether that's functioning? Is it really providing a good resource? I've advocated for it for a long time. We're going for a tour, and I'm hopeful, really hopeful, that there would be another place for the police to bring someone besides that hospital or the jail.
I haven't had
Oh, yeah.
personal experience with that, but I would love to hear about your tour, and I'm going to go look into that because I'm curious to know what services actually they provide and who would qualify to go there. Yeah.
Right. The CNG is open 24/7, so it's separate than the guidance center. It's separate. No. But the facility is open. Right. This is true. But here's something really important to know and be hopeful that the state of New York awarded just 3 Daniel Prude grants for an agency, and CNG received it, to work with the Nassau County Police to create the kind of synergy that we are hopeful for. So that kind of, what was that? Daniel's Law, right. But the bill specific for the grant had his full name. Right. It is independent from the guidance center. It is just with the crisis center. And I think, maybe somebody in Rochester, like 3 other locations in New York received it. So that's very new. And I keep asking Jacqueline McCarthy about it, and I haven't gotten more information. But yeah, so that's a very good thing, obviously. So that kind of coordination in the future.
All right, now I'll talk about orders of protection. This is an area of the law that I hope no one in this room ever has to avail themselves of. When I have clients who I go to family court with, it is awful. It's not a happy place. They don't want to be there. I don't want to be there. Something really awful happened in order for us to be there. And it's an extremely hard decision. It's an impossible decision to make, where you finally reach the point where your advocacy and caregiving for your loved one has to change in a way where you need to put up a legal barrier between you to protect your physical safety and also your emotional safety. A lot of it's harassment. A lot of what we see is like emotional torture, being held hostage really in your own home by your loved one who's really suffering. So it's awful all around, but I think it's important to talk about it because I want you to be informed about what it really looks like. Family court is one of the venues where you can get an order of protection. It's really family court or criminal court. Family court, what you're saying to a family court, you're asking for protection. It's a piece of paper. It's an order of protection that says what your family member cannot do to you. What it means is you go to family court and you file papers. It's called a petition. It's a family offense petition. What you're putting in your papers is that your family member has committed an offense against you. It's stalking, harassment, aggravated harassment. It could be any type of assault. There's a number of different offenses that qualify for an order of protection. When you're filling out this paperwork, in addition to all your just generic name, address, your relationship to the person, that's really key. You have to be family. You have to be either in an intimate relationship, child, parent, brother, sister, blood relation, intimate relationship, or living in the same household. If you don't meet those criteria, you really can't avail yourself of a family court order of protection. There's different things you can ask for. You can ask that the person stay away from your home, stay away from your place of business, stay away from, if you have minors living in the home, stay away from them, stay away from their school. You can ask the court for a stay away from your person, meaning they can't come near you, wherever you are. You can ask them for a refrain from communication, meaning they can't call you, text you, contact you on social media, things like that. You can ask for a removal order, which is essentially saying this person lives in my house and I need them to be removed from the premises or not be permitted to return to the premises. They can be forced to surrender firearms if they have them. You can ask for protection for a pet. I've had to do that before. Family court focuses on safety. You're not really going there to punish someone. It's because there's a safety concern in the home. Family court is very friendly to people coming in without a lawyer. I like to tell my clients that they are better off with representation, but I'm biased because I'm a lawyer. But it's complicated. Maybe filling out the paperwork on day one doesn't seem so complicated, but I've had clients fill out the paperwork, then you have to defend it. Then you have to prove your case eventually. And if if you didn't put in all the facts, or you didn't attach evidence or a police report or pictures, or, and your loved one wants to fight it down the road, it's a real hearing before a judge that will take testimony as to whether or not a family offense actually was committed. And it's a real court proceeding. And even lawyers need their own lawyers. So with family court, when you go into family court and you file this family offense petition, you're going to see a judge the same day because you're alleging that there's an emergency and you need immediate protection. So you're getting before a judge right away within a few hours. I say hours because I've sat in family court for the larger part of an entire day with clients before. When you see the judge, they're reading your papers and they're going to make a decision right then and there, just based on what you say, whether or not to issue an immediate temporary order of protection. The hope is that you're walking out of that building with a temporary order of protection and that right away you have secured this document that's supposed to protect you. What happens next is your loved one gets served with papers. Through wherever you live, the county sheriff is tasked with serving them. If they're in the hospital at the time, they'll be served in the hospital. If they're at home, they'll be served at home. If you obtained a removal order from your home, they will be removed from the premises by the police when they're served with the papers. They'll be given a couple minutes to pack a bag, not to move out, but to just pack some emergency overnight items, toiletries, their phone, charger, and they'll be removed from the premises. Once they're served, what they're being served with, in addition to a copy of the order of protection, in addition to the copy of your papers, so they read everything that you're telling the court, they get the right to read it. They'll get a copy of it. They're also going to be given notice of the next court date. You have to go back to court. They have the right to, their defense. They're going to come to court if they want to. They have the right to an attorney. If they have the means, they can retain counsel. If they don't, if they meet certain income or asset requirements, the court can appoint them counsel. And you're off to the races. It's up to them. They have a lot of say in how the next phase goes. I've had people experience where their loved one says, I'll consent to a 6-month order of protection. I'll agree to a 1-year order of protection. There's no finding that I did anything wrong. I'm not admitting to anything in the papers. I'm not admitting that I committed a family offense. I'm just agreeing to the issuing of a order of protection for a longer period of time than the temporary one would last. And the case is over. That to me is like best case scenario. You get what you wanted. There's no back and forth. There's no future court appearances. What is more likely to happen is they don't show up to court. Maybe they're still in the hospital. Now you have another court date. They don't show up to court. Judge gives them another chance. Maybe then eventually they do show up to court. Now they're appointed counsel. Now that attorney needs more time to meet with them and speak with them. While all this is going on, where are they living? If they're in the hospital short term, they're safe, secure, on an inpatient unit, getting treatment. But if they're not in the hospital, if they were living in your home when the order of protection was issued, the biggest question I get and the biggest problem we have is where do they go? Where do they live? Some families have the means and we'll put them up in a hotel short term while we figure out long-term solutions. Many of you, if not all of you, know about the housing shortages, on Long Island, in the boroughs. Not very easy to find emergency housing for someone suffering from a serious mental illness. If they also have other disorders, drug addiction issues, alcohol use disorders, it complicates the whole picture. So it's really complicated. Filing for an order of protection really requires a comprehensive approach. If they're in the hospital, I'll advocate with families. You want to make sure that the social worker and staff in the hospital know about the order of protection, and you have to advocate, where is my loved one going to be discharged to? I've had scenarios where they say, well, the only option is a shelter. Where else are they going to go? They don't have income or assets, or they don't have enough to put themselves up in any type of temporary housing. Unless the family is going to foot the bill, where else are the hospitals sending people who don't have homes? They're sending them to shelters, which is not a place that we want our loved one. It's not a place that is going to help support them and keep them stable and compliant and help them achieve the success and stability that we want for them coming out of a hospital. This is what makes it so difficult when families face a situation where I'm worried about my safety. I'm worried about a situation where my loved one comes back to my house. But where do they go? And I see so many families, and it's just that sense of, like I said earlier, most of my clients are parents of an adult child. It's that sense of guilt. It's that sense of, I will put my child first. Before my own safety, I will put my child's safety and their well-being ahead of my own. And so I will let them back in my house. And I will not let them go to a shelter, and I will not let them be unhoused. And that's a decision I can't make for a client. And that's a decision that I don't judge my clients for. And we try to come up with the best possible scenario if they're not in a position where they want to put up that legal barrier and set that boundary and ensure their safety. Family court orders of protection, even if you get one, they're not forever. You can get one for 6 months, a year, 2 years is really the max. The last thing I want to say about family court orders of protection is it's a piece of paper. It means nothing if you don't use it. So if you're going to go through this whole process and you're going to get an order of protection, and you get one and you have it, and they violate the order of protection, the response is the 911 call. They came to your house, they weren't supposed to be there. They came to your place of work, they weren't supposed to be there. Again, you're inviting someone into your home, into your workplace, and you don't know what will happen. Could that officer be compassionate and just, advise them to remove themselves from the premises and leave? Or do they get arrested automatically? And now all of a sudden they have charges against them for contempt. It's contempt of a court order. They violated the order of protection. The other avenue for orders of protection is through the criminal court system. As a family member, as a caregiver, as a neighbor, whoever you are to this person, you can get an order of protection through criminal court on your own. This is something that would happen where the person was arrested for some type of criminal activity. Most likely this comes under some type of, domestic offense, and the court issues an order of protection as a result of whatever happened in your home or to you. And there's no relationship requirement. You don't have to be family to have an order of protection against someone after they've been arrested for whatever criminal activity they allegedly committed. But what has to happen is they have to be charged with some crime, and they're only issued for as long as the criminal case is going on. So if the case ends up getting dropped, I've had a case before where we don't really want our loved ones in the criminal justice system, but we want that protection. They kind of come hand in hand. So the process would start by, someone gets arrested, the DA, so, your loved one is on one side of the courtroom, DA, prosecutors on the other side. They're going to ask for an order of protection to be issued against whoever was the victim in the scenario. The judge really decides whether to issue the order of protection and under what terms. You don't really have a say as, the victim or the complaining witness, or anything like that. And it could be similar terms to the family court order of protection: stay away from your home, stay away from your person, refrain from communication, surrender the firearms, protect the pet, whatever it might be. With a criminal court order of protection, a violation results in an arrest. You violate an order of protection, now you have another set of charges against you for violating a court order, new criminal charges. The question I often get is, well, what if I don't want to cooperate? I don't want to press charges. I don't want my loved one to be arrested. The idea of pressing charges, it's really misleading. It's a phrase that we use all the time, but you really don't have the control you think you have when it comes to, cooperating with the police. Sure, you don't have to give a statement, testimony, participate. You could be subpoenaed if they really want to take this all the way. But the DA and the prosecutor can get evidence elsewhere. Maybe there's video footage. Maybe there were witnesses. So whether you want to press charges, whether you want to cooperate, whether you say, well, I really, this is not what I wanted for my loved one, you lose a lot of that ability to control the narrative. Prosecutors, like I said, they can move forward even if you don't participate. You can tell the DA, I don't want to, I'm not going to give a statement. The DA can still continue. Through the criminal court system, the last thing I really want to talk about in that is there are mental health options through the criminal court system. There are mental health focused outcomes that are possible. Yes. What do you mean police?
Because something happened, they were fighting with, or something like that, and the police are caught. And the police will say there's an order of protection against you. I mean, if the person never even went to court or anything.
I'm not aware of that. Only a court can issue an order of protection, not a police.
So the person who I'm talking about was arrested, and they spent the night in jail. So were they before a judge? Would they have gone before a judge before they were released?
They would have to be arraigned.
It would be
the arraignment is when the order of protection would be issued.
Would be issued, and it's for 90 days, not for 6 months or anything else. Is that a temporary order of protection?
Probably, but I don't know. I would have to read the document. It would say. So the mental health outcomes that are possible, the biggest one we know about and what people may have heard about is mental health court, diversion courts, drug treatment courts, People have questions about what that means and what it really gets you. The biggest thing to understand is it's voluntary. You can't force your loved one to choose this path. Even if it may be the best path for them, they have to commit to a program that they're going to abide by all the requirements of the program, and there are a lot. These programs are no joke. They have really strict mandatory requirements for attending the program, seeing the doctors. The service providers are all affiliated with the county where, you're in court. So if you're in, Queens County Criminal Court and you're availing yourself of the Queens County Mental Health Court and your services are in Queens County, those providers are connected to the court system and they're reporting directly to the court whether you showed up to your program, whether you passed your drug test, whatever it is that your requirements are. And it's really strict. I'm not saying that if you miss one appointment, you lose and the game is over and now you're convicted of the underlying crime. But I make the point that it's voluntary because the person has to have enough insight that they want to commit themselves to this outpatient care, see their doctor, take their meds, do the drug test, whatever it is, and complete the whole program, coming out the other side so that there is no record. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. It's almost, the best case scenario. They've gone through this whole treatment program. They're in a much better place, we hope, at the end of the treatment program. And they don't have any type of charges against them anymore. The charges are essentially dismissed once they complete the program. So there's no record. Depending on whether they meet the criteria for participation in this program, you have to meet certain criteria. I've seen it work wonders. I bring it up because when your loved one is arrested and they're experiencing a mental health crisis, and maybe that was the underlying issue that led to the arrest, you want to make sure that you and your family and your loved one who's now in the system has all this information and asks all these questions about, to their lawyer and to maybe their legal aid attorney or their public defender or their privately retained counsel about, is this an option for me? Is this the best option for me? What are the risks of going to mental health court? And, what are the benefits? And what are the other options that might not require court-mandated treatment for 6 months or whatever the term is? Because you might have someone who says, I'll find my own providers and I'll go to my own doctor and I'll do my own, treatment. I don't want court-mandated therapy or court-mandated drug testing, things like that. Tonight, we kind of covered a lot and really sensitive, hard topics. And I think I said earlier, it's not meant to scare you or intimidate you, but what I really want is to raise awareness of these really hard, impossible scenarios, but also instill upon you a sense of you're not alone in this. If any of this resonated with you or you have someone in your life who has experienced anything that we've discussed tonight, sometimes just having that sense of you're not alone, you're not facing this alone. Someone else in the room has gone through something similar, not maybe exactly the same, but something similar. I've heard from clients that when they attend peer support groups and hear from others, that it makes them feel connected and it makes them just feel a sense of community. Like I'm not on this island by myself doing this alone. For me, even though I know the system and I know the legal ups and downs, I collaborate with other people, professionals, agencies all the time, looking for resources for clients, looking for ways to educate them and get them information about things that are out there that I don't know about yet, like the one you just brought up. I mean, to be able to offer resources for those resources that NAMI offers. There are so many different services and resources out there, peer support groups, family support groups, and I just encourage everyone who has that sense of feeling like you're doing this alone and that there's nobody there to help you, to look for that help, to get that help. Thank you so much for having me. Any more questions?
When the person was arrested, this is the same person I'm talking about, and he was taken away by the police. Now, the mother did not want an order of protection against her or against him, but the court did it. So what? Criminal court did it. So what happens after that?
Like I said, you lose the control there. Sometimes you don't have the choice. You can advocate. I mean, listen, you're going to communicate with the DA and you're going to communicate best you can. Say that this is not what you want. And I haven't had that exact scenario. It really depends on so many different circumstances because different judges handle things differently. The DA on the other side of the table handles things differently. Depends on what the underlying crime is, how serious it was, what the injuries were, if any. So there's so many factors. So it's not a one size fits all answer.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to clarify to make sure I understand correctly. Family court's not criminal at all until they violate, then it becomes criminal.
Correct.
Okay. And if a person, a client, the parent goes to family court without an attorney, will they appoint them an attorney if they don't have socioeconomic needs? I think.
So they have legal services available in most of the family court buildings I've been in, Queens, Manhattan, Nassau, Suffolk, and they'll help you fill out the paperwork. I don't know if they will represent you throughout the entire proceeding.
I've had clients tell me that they got a court appointed, and I think that that attorney will show up for them at the next court date, at least. I don't know, like what you're saying, if it goes on and continues. Does anyone know that?
That's a good question. Yeah.
You represent yourself. But are you going to have a part 2 about AOT and ACT and any of that stuff?
I would happily come back and talk about that. We did a program last January. We talked a lot about like the coming out of a hospital, discharge planning and AOT. But yeah, I mean, it's really important. I would talk about it.
I just wanted to say that we come from Family and Children's Association, where we have a support group for people whose loved ones are at risk for criminal justice involvement or already involved in the criminal justice system. And the loved ones come to the support group. And anyone that's in Nassau County over the age of 60 is welcome.
Mental health court?
Oh,
No.
you can't?
It's voluntary. So if you think about it, they have to really want to do it. And it's not over their objection. They have to voluntarily enter the program, go through the intake process, and then show up to the program every, however often it's required.
Yeah.
My question is kind of related to his question. If the person is not competent to make a decision on their own, whether they need mental health help, are there any other options besides the 3 that you illustrated, the 911, the mobile crisis, and the wellness track? Like, is there anything else anyone can do to try to persuade this loved one to get the help that they need when they're not competent to make a decision and there's no imminent danger? Like, they are not gonna, it's a nonviolent situation, but it's just like an ongoing chronic, torturous situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's like interventionists and private psychiatric interventionists and people who work with families and do like at-home interventions to try to get someone to go voluntarily to a hospital. Ah. No, it's not a lawyer. You want a clinician. You want like somebody with clinical training. Also, guardianship, I mean, we don't have time to talk about guardianship, but guardians can't involuntarily commit someone or consent to psychiatric medication.
Can I talk? There's a program through people that have lived experiences. It's an agency called Hallie, Hands Across Long Island. And the Office of Mental Health has put out grant money for peers, people who've been through mental health challenges and or substance use challenges, that I could make a referral to them and somebody will reach out to your loved one. It's not a silver bullet answer, because if your loved one doesn't answer the phone or doesn't want to work with them, it may not work, but they will try to come at a different angle. Like, I want to help you find housing. I want to help you find a job. Then they don't come with the clinical mindset. So if anyone wants more information, I can get that for you.
I have another question on the mental health courts. Now, it is voluntary. So, through the process. And is there a place where it's like follow through, because it's spoken to the day. Discussing having treatment versus prison time. Mention is full mental. Full of someone. Full of something else. They're now looking to have an inpatient, not call it like a resident.
Right, it depends. I mean, listen, there's no one answer because I don't know the facts of this case versus that case. But yes, it could be inpatient. They're screened and it's determined what's appropriate for whatever the offense was and what the illness is and what the symptoms are and the type of treatment that's needed.
Just out.
If they meet criteria for inpatient, if they are at a level where they outpatient is not sufficient, it would be inpatient care, yeah.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about, this is a little definitely off topic, but it's about people that have mental illness or getting disability specifically, so they can survive, because as you were talking about, there's very limited housing in general. And I find that I don't know how many people have had the experience. I have tried to get disability for my loved one and through an attorney. And what are the odds of that happening? So they could get monetary assistance to live in the world. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of, this
Are you
is not
asking
real.
what are the chances someone can get Social Security?
Yeah, Social Security disability.
I mean, that's not an answer that I can give because it's independently assessed based on everyone's application. Yeah.
But I mean, obviously there's a lot of people in this room with children or loved ones that have clearly got mental illness. And I'm not talking like specifically about a particular diagnosis or I just wanted to know if you've, in your experience, have you seen people able to get that help?
Yes.
Okay.
I applied myself for my son and he received it. I hired a lawyer, it didn't work, but in 3 appeals. It started when he was 18, then 21. I don't know. I can't remember it took a long time, but the last one was me filling it out. Absolutely. It's a digital experience. Did you want to take one? All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. I'm positive you got a lot out of this. The last meeting that Jamie participated, it is on our website, that is recorded. I really encourage you to go on to namiqn.org. I will post your FAC flyers on there as well. They're up front because our crisis page gives you the contact, how to find mobile crisis in each of the different counties, who to call, when to call, what psychiatric hospitals have beds. I don't list every hospital on the crisis page, just ones that have psych beds are listed. So you're aware of that. There's also a protocol for NUMAC. If your loved one is going to Nassau County Medical Center, they ask that you fax them medical records, that you give the call the emergency room, the psych emergency room. So all those protocols are on our crisis page. It's really important you take a look at that, print it out, copy it, what have you. I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that we have support groups almost every night of the week, whether it is a peer-to-peer, a caregiver, we have in-person caregiver support, we have virtual caregiver support. We are starting another family-to-family class virtually in about 3 weeks. So that is our 8-week psychoeducational class. It's essential for caregivers to understand a lot of this. We don't go obviously into in-depth legal conversation, but we make you aware of all of this, what all the diagnosis means, what the medications are, and so forth. And it becomes your loved one support group, your safety net, right? Maria, it becomes, and Lee, their current family-to-family teachers, that class becomes an incredible safety net. That is a person to call the participants. We will have another monthly meeting in June on women's mental health, women's health, and every month except for May, because we're going to be tabling at many different mental health fairs, and we also have our gala in May, which a flyer is up front. And why is a gala important? A big party for mental health? Well, first of all, we are honoring Jamie. Yay! Jamie's been a tremendous supporter of NAMI, and we're very thankful for that. And I do have to say, when I call Jamie and I say, somebody's in crisis with a legal situation, she calls them within like 2 hours or an hour or 10 minutes, depending on where she is. She's not in court. So that's why we are honoring her, because that is important. So the gala is essential because we're 100% grant funded. We are free. This is free. That's what NAMI is all about. Caregivers sharing lived experience and inviting experts to share their knowledge. So the gala matters. Yes, it's a great celebration and it's a tremendous amount of fun. Everybody loves to dance. It is fun. But we need your support. So that's essential. Gail, what I leave out? Right.
Obviously about documentation. It is imperative that you have documentation. We have had it since my son was 10 years old. He's now a grown man, and we still document. We still make sure we have information available should the need arise. And I have to say, we are very fortunate that my son hasn't been hospitalized in well over 30 years. So we're on the right road. But documentation, when we see symptoms that are appearing, we can, for sure, because we have the relationship with his therapist, we jot down a note to them. This is what we see. There is a little change. Address it. And they're not sharing with us what they're going to do, but we are giving them some information that they don't see. Documentation.
Of course. There should, what did you say, Liz? Oh, hi, I'm Lee Israel. We've met, but I was in the Amazon when you did your last presentation and I missed it, but I watched it. I'm so glad I finally got to see you do this. It was wonderful. Sue Maida, who was in my family-to-family class and support group, suggests that the documentation be one sheet. So if you can make it concise, do that. It helps. Bullet points. Yes, yes, exactly.
When you represent families, are you representing both sides? Are you defending? You,
Hello. I generally represent the well members of the family. You know, they're the ones who are reaching out for help, and I'm helping them advocate. A lot of times behind the scenes, you know, helping them make more educated decisions and advocate for their loved ones with full information about their rights, their, you know, if the person's in the hospital, the patient's rights. Sometimes I get calls from patients in the hospital who want private counsel. It's very complicated for a patient in a psychiatric hospital to retain counsel. They don't have access. I mean, so for something as simple as like signing an engagement letter and paying a retainer fee, they don't have access, you know, to their wallet. But also they have mental hygiene legal service, and that agency provides free legal counsel to patients in psychiatric units across New York State. Mental hygiene legal service. And I don't talk myself out of a job, but what I tell people is they're good at their job. That's their whole job. That agency exists to represent these individuals in the hospital. That's what they do all day, every day. And they're on the units more often than I can be, and they're available, and they're in court with the patients every single week. So they know the doctors, and they know the hospitals, and they know the judges in their county. It's mental hygiene legal service.
Jane,
Right. You can't hire them. It's not like it's an agency. They are tasked with representing. Their mandate is to represent, amongst others, but patients on these psychiatric units who make a request for counsel. If your loved one has ever been in the hospital and they request to be released from the hospital before the doctor wants to discharge them, for example, or if the hospital wants to take them to court for treatment over their objection, they're entitled to a lawyer. So for the most part, I represent the well members of the family.
I know it's the end of the night, but the Supreme Court, does that ever work for someone to go and petition for the mental hygiene warrant at Supreme Court?
It depends.
Okay, that's another big, that'd be another conversation, right? Because I'm a little unclear about it. Okay,
The answer is yes. I mean, sometimes it works.
like everything, it could,
Depends on the count.
different outcomes.
Depends on the situation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.